Texas. And man, as if I couldn't tell.
This lecture is going to revolve around two themes that are crucial to understanding Texas politics. First of those is ideology, and the second is political culture. Both of these will interact throughout the lecture, and although we may not mention one or the other for quite some time, they will be driving the talk. Political culture is your beliefs, your actions, your political practices, what you expect from government. It's just like the culture that we have around us every day, but that as it relates to politics. Your political culture is unique to yourself, your family, your state, your region, your country. Secondly, your ideology is a belief system that underlies not necessarily your politics, but in this case, your political ideology certainly is that. Likewise, a political ideology would hold for a region or a city. In this case, we will look at how Texas came to have the shape that it does, where it's situated in the United States, and how our ideology as Texans and how our political culture as Texans is unique. How will this continue to interact throughout our politics? This lecture will lay the groundwork for many courses to come as we examine Texas politics, Texas Congress, Texas executive action throughout history. A lot of these terms we examine today are going to be relevant. A lot of this stuff we're going to begin very far back into European times, but the political culture and the ideology continues in such a...
The 5 terms that we'll begin with in order to understand Texas politics, political culture, and ideology will be the European and most specifically French Enlightenment, the idea of Eurocentrism, the idea of American exceptionalism in a city on a hill, and lastly, manifest destiny. To understand the political ideology and culture of Texas, you have to understand that of the United States, and first that of Europe. That of Europe is firmly grounded in the Enlightenment. And to understand the Enlightenment, you have to go back a little bit farther to the Black Death, or as we know it, the Black Plague, in the late 1300s. It killed an estimated almost 200 million people in Europe. The result of the Black Death was a questioning of their traditional worldview. They questioned the church and the domination of God over all things. Shortly after followed the Renaissance, and from there the scientific revolution. Men began to categorize knowledge, question that the sun revolved around the earth, look for scientific truth, and from there it was believed that this might be extended to politics.
Two of the most important ideas in the Enlightenment are reason and progress. The idea of reason is paramount in constructing the democracies to come, including our own. You look at the Great Seal on the dollar bill, and you see the eye of the pyramid. That is reason in and of itself. The all-seeing eye represents reason. The God that the Europeans believed in was an all-reasonable God. It was believed through the categorization of knowledge, through encyclopedias, which were started in this time. Through the ordering of scientific knowledge, we would one day be godly in our ordering and understanding of the universe. It was also believed that all people were capable of reason. It is this idea that we are all capable of reason that takes the power from the monarch and back into the hands of the people. This is the central idea of the Enlightenment. That, combined with the idea of progress, that over time we can better ourselves and better society, leads to changes in schools, in prisons, and really throughout European society. Now, although it seems like a good idea to a society based in rationality, one of the problems with it is that not all humans share the same rationality. If I give you a question and ask you to solve a problem or to come up with an answer, out of 30 people, we might have very different ways of reasoning and getting to that conclusion. There is no one rationality. for me to believe that my rationality is godly seems a little arrogant, right? This leads us to our next term, which is Eurocentrism.
Along with the elevation of French reason and European reason came the parallel idea that other cultures, other peoples, and other civilizations were not worthy. This is the very kernel of Eurocentrism. This is still with us today. Oftentimes, most people, when they think about the biggest city in the world in 1492, would say Paris or London. They wouldn't think it was in the Americas. It was what is now called Mexico City, or at the time Tenochtitlan. The underlying assumption that the Indians did not have a worthy culture in the case of the Americas, or the Africans in the case of Africans, or any other people that were not based in Europe, and had no cultures or civilizations that needed to be respected, laid the groundwork for colonialism. It was in this spirit and in this ideology that John Winthrop sailed to the Americas with a group of Puritans to found the Massachusetts Bay Colony. John Winthrop, in his first sermon to that group of pilgrims, laid out two more terms that would shape the ideology of the United States for centuries to come. These two terms were that of a city on a hill and American exceptionalism.
The creation of these two terms and the use of them is interwoven throughout United States history. The idea of American exceptionalism refers to the idea among the Puritans that they were blessed by their God, and that was affirmed through their survival of their passage across the Atlantic Ocean, and later by their survival here in the Americas. You can see the Eurocentrism inherent in it, and that they do not attribute it at all to the help that they received from the American Indians, but credit that to their God, their work ethic, their system of beliefs. Likewise, their beliefs for a city on a hill were also somewhat arrogant. They envisioned their model of government and the new colony that they would found would be a shining light for the rest of the world. Regarding a city on a hill, we can see evidence of that almost every time the president gives a major address. He always almost ends it, and God bless the United States of America. Not any other countries, just the United States. This idea that we're a city on the hill and we lead the country in democracy underlies many of our military invasions and the assumption that we are able to spread democracy and bring it to other countries around the world. This also dovetails with the idea of American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism can be used in two different ways. We can be an exceptional nation, but we can also be the exception to the rule. It seemed ludicrous to us if after this upcoming election China was to invade our country in order to free us from the tyranny of Trump or Clinton. We would decide that we would think that we could do that for ourselves. However, our beliefs that we could do that for another country go without question. Likewise, the United States will freely drop or conduct drone strikes in Pakistan or in Yemen and other countries, but would never stand for that within its own borders. Right? You could never think of Mexico conducting a drone strike in Houston and announcing that they missed their target and apologizing for it, and the United States doing nothing. Right? We would go to war. This is also a form of American exceptionalism.
This brings us to our last term, which is manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was an ideological conception. It came about in the United States in the early 1800s, just before the annexation of Texas, Mexican-American War. It was used to justify the taking of all the territory and all the lands that we now know as the United States for the westward expansion of the United States at that time. Inherent in this idea, we see Eurocentrism, we see American exceptionalism, we see the idea of a city on a hill. The United States believed at that time that they would civilize the continent. The Indian nations there were discarded and thought of as savages. The Mexican people were characterized as savages. And that the United States was the country that was ordained to bring civilization to the continent under this idea of manifest destiny. It was largely used for the justification in the taking of so much land, California, Texas, for the Mexican-American War, for the invasion of Cuba, and to not just limit itself to what we now know as the continental United States. Advocates for Manifest Destiny advocated taking all of Central America, all of many more islands, much broader than the current conception that we see right now. Manifest Destiny, because of its inherent nature, was crucial in the founding of Texas. Texas itself was founded by a large amount of Anglos and Southern transplants, and they were very well familiar with this idea of manifest destiny.